When my mother-in-law's neighbor got hired as our new community manager, she immediately started targeting me with petty rules and restrictions. She had no idea that I actually owned 51% of the entire company that operated our co-working space, and had been quietly observing operations for 3 years, while she thought I was just another freelancer she could push around. What started as workplace harassment was about to become the most expensive lesson in respect she'd ever receive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Creative Hub Austin as I settled into my usual spot in the main co-working area, laptop bag slung over my shoulder and coffee in hand. For 3 years, this place had been my sanctuary, a vibrant community of entrepreneurs, freelancers, and remote workers who had become more like family than colleagues. The familiar hum of keyboards clicking, phone conversations, and the gentle whir of the espresso machine from Hub Café created the perfect backdrop for productivity. I had claimed the same corner desk every morning since joining Creative Hub, not because it was assigned to me, but because the other members had naturally come to recognize it as Lisa's spot. It faced the windows overlooking the bustling streets of downtown Austin, with a clear view of both the entrance and the cafe area where impromptu collaborations happened throughout the day. From this vantage point, I could see new members struggling with the printer, observe when someone looked overwhelmed, or notice when one of our regular freelancers seemed to be having a tough day. "Morning, Lisa," called Mike Chen, our resident graphic designer, as he wheeled his laptop bag toward his preferred standing desk near the windows. "Did you see the email about the new photography workshop next week? Are you organizing it?" I smiled and shook my head. "Actually, that's all our new community manager's initiative. I'm just a regular member these days." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. For nearly 2 years, I had been the unofficial community coordinator, organizing networking events, welcoming new members, and serving as the bridge between the workspace users and management. It had been a role I'd fallen into naturally, combining my background in nonprofit leadership with my genuine love for fostering connections between creative professionals. Sarah Thompson, a marketing consultant who had been with the Hub almost as long as I had, looked up from her laptop with a puzzled expression. "That's weird. I haven't seen Jennifer around much, except for that first day when she introduced herself. Where has she been?" The question highlighted something that had been bothering me for the past month. Jennifer Walsh, our new community manager, had indeed been conspicuously absent during peak hours when members actually needed support. She arrived promptly at 9, spent most of her time in the private office designated for management staff, and left exactly at 5. It was a stark contrast to her predecessor, Marcus, who had been available throughout the day and had encouraged my informal leadership role within the community. "She's probably getting settled," I offered diplomatically, though privately I shared Sarah's confusion. In my previous role as executive director of a nonprofit focused on small business development, I had learned that community building required presence, accessibility, and genuine engagement with the people you served. Jennifer's approach seemed more focused on administrative tasks and policy enforcement than relationship building. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother-in-law, Carol. "Hope you're having a good day at work, dear. Jennifer mentioned she's really enjoying her new position. She's so excited about making improvements to the workspace." The message made me pause. Jennifer had been discussing her job with Carol? It seemed an odd topic for neighbors to discuss. But then again, Carol had always been friendly with everyone in their Lakeway subdivision. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of collaborative energy and focused work. Around 10:30, Alex Rodriguez, a web developer who had recently joined the Hub, approached my desk looking frustrated. "Lisa, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm having trouble with the conference room booking system. It keeps saying my membership level doesn't have access, but I thought all members could book the small meeting rooms?" I frowned, pulling up the Hub's member portal on my laptop. "Let me check the current policies." As I navigated through the system, I noticed several changes that hadn't been there the previous week. Meeting room access was now tiered based on membership level, with hot desk members limited to the cafe area for calls and meetings. Printing was now restricted to 50 pages per month for basic memberships. Even the coffee in the cafe now required a purchase, rather than being included as a general amenity. These are new restrictions, I told Alex, showing him the updated policy page. Let me find Jennifer and see if we can get clarity on the changes. I made my way to the management office, a small but well-appointed space near the conference rooms. Through the glass door, I could see Jennifer at her desk, meticulously organizing files and typing on her computer. She looked up as I knocked, her expression shifting from neutral to something that seemed almost offensive. Hi, Jennifer. I have a quick question about the new booking policies. Alex is trying to reserve a small meeting room for a client call, but the system is blocking him. Jennifer set down her pen and regarded me with a look that felt surprisingly cold for such a simple request. The booking system is working exactly as intended, Lisa. Hot desk members have access to collaborative spaces, which includes the cafe area. Private meeting rooms are reserved for dedicated desk and office members who pay premium rates for premium amenities. The response was technically accurate, but missed the larger point about community accessibility and member satisfaction. I understand the logic, but Alex has been a member for 3 months and this is his first client meeting here. It seems like the kind of situation where a one-time exception might help retain a promising member. I appreciate your concern for other members, Lisa, but I need to maintain consistent policy enforcement. Making exceptions creates confusion and undermines the membership structure. Jennifer's tone was professionally pleasant, but firm in a way that felt oddly personal. I'm sure Alex can conduct his call from the cafe like other hot desk members. I nodded, accepting her decision while mentally noting the stark difference from Marcus's approach. He would have not only approved the exception but probably would have helped Alex understand the membership upgrade options in a way that felt supportive rather than restrictive. No problem. I'll let him know about the cafe option. As I turned to leave, Jennifer's voice stopped me. Actually, Lisa, while you're here, I wanted to discuss something with you. I've noticed that several members seem to come to you with questions and requests that should be directed to me as the community manager. I'd appreciate it if you could redirect those conversations to the proper channels going forward. The request caught me off guard. For nearly 2 years, helping other members had been a natural part of my presence at the Hub. It wasn't something I had sought out or formalized. It had evolved organically as newer members recognized my familiarity with the space and policies. Of course, I can redirect operational questions to you. I was just trying to be helpful since you weren't in the office yesterday when Alex first had the booking issue. I was here yesterday, Jennifer corrected, a slight edge creeping into her voice. I was handling administrative responsibilities that require focused attention. Community management involves much more than just being visible in the common areas. The comment felt like a subtle criticism of my own approach to community engagement during my time in nonprofit leadership. I chose not to take the bait. You're absolutely right. I'll make sure to direct any future questions to you directly. Returning to my desk, I found Alex still looking confused about the meeting room situation. The cafe it is, I told him with an encouraging smile. The acoustics are actually pretty good near the windows, and you'll have natural light for your video call. As Alex set up for his meeting in the cafe area, Sarah Thompson caught my eye and made a subtle gesture toward the management office. Everything okay? You looked a little tense coming back from talking to Jennifer. I considered how to respond diplomatically, just working through some policy clarifications. Growing pains with the new management style, I think. Sarah lowered her voice. She seems very different from Marcus, more rules-focused. I tried to ask her about renewing the monthly networking mixer, and she said she was still evaluating the cost-benefit analysis of social events. The networking mixers had been one of my favorite initiatives during Marcus's tenure. Once a month, we would transform the main workspace after hours into a casual networking environment, with local food trucks, craft beer from Austin breweries, and informal presentations from members about their work. The events had led to numerous collaborations, new friendships, and even a few business partnerships that had grown out of Hub connections. Give her time to settle in, I suggested, though privately I was beginning to worry about the direction the community was heading. Change can be challenging for everyone. The rest of the morning passed quietly, but I found myself paying more attention to the subtle dynamics within the workspace. Jennifer emerged from her office twice, both times to address policy-related issues rather than to check in with members or foster community connections. When Mike Chen asked about replacing the coffee beans in the cafe with a local Austin roaster that several members had requested, she explained that vendor relationships required formal evaluation processes and couldn't be changed based on informal member feedback. Around noon, I received a phone call from Robert Kim, the CEO of Austin Workspace Solutions, the parent company that managed Creative Hub, along with several other co-working locations throughout Texas. Robert and I had never spoken directly during my 3 years as a member, though I was well aware of his leadership style and business philosophy through my hidden position as majority shareholder. Lisa, I hope I'm not interrupting your workday. I wanted to touch base about some feedback we've been receiving regarding the transition to new management at Creative Hub. My heart rate quickened. Feedback? What kind of feedback? Nothing too concerning yet, but our member satisfaction surveys have shown a slight dip in community engagement scores since Jennifer started. As someone who's been with the Hub for several years and seems well connected within the member community, I was hoping you might have some insights. The request put me in an unusual position. As a regular member, sharing feedback about management was appropriate and helpful. As the secret majority owner, I had insights that went far beyond typical member perspectives. I chose to respond from my public position while mentally noting the need to monitor the situation more closely. I think Jennifer is still finding her footing, I offered carefully. The previous manager, Marcus, had a very collaborative approach that members had grown accustomed to. Some of the new policies feel more restrictive, but that might just be a matter of different management styles. Can you give me some specific examples? Understanding the details would help us provide appropriate support for Jennifer's transition. I outlined the meeting room access changes, the new restrictions on amenities, and the shift from flexible, member-focused policies to more rigid, administrative approaches. Robert listened thoughtfully, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his genuine concern for member experience. This is helpful context, Lisa. We want to ensure that Creative Hub maintains its reputation as a supportive community for Austin's creative professionals. Would you be comfortable if I mentioned to Jennifer that we've received some informal feedback about policy changes without specifically attributing comments to you? That would be fine, I agreed. I think she wants to do a good job. Maybe some guidance on balancing structure with community flexibility would be helpful. After ending the call, I sat staring at my laptop screen without really seeing it. The conversation had highlighted a growing tension between my role as a community member and my hidden responsibility as the ultimate decision-maker for Creative Hub's direction. For 3 years, I had deliberately maintained my anonymity. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Wanting to experience the workspace as a regular user, rather than being treated differently because of my ownership stake. The decision to remain anonymous had been deliberate and carefully considered. After inheriting the controlling interest in Austin Workspace Solutions from my father's estate, I had initially planned to take an active role in management. However, my background was in nonprofit leadership rather than commercial real estate, and I had wanted to understand the business from the ground up before making any significant changes. Joining Creative Hub as a regular member had provided invaluable insights into what made co-working communities successful. I had learned that the best spaces balanced professional amenities with genuine human connection, that successful community managers were part facilitator and part social director, and that the most satisfied members were those who felt seen, supported, and connected to something larger than their individual work. Now, watching Jennifer's management approach potentially undermine the very qualities that made Creative Hub special, I was beginning to question whether my anonymity was serving the community's best interests. The feedback Robert had mentioned suggested that other members were noticing the changes too, and if the trend continued, it could affect not just member satisfaction but also retention and the Hub's reputation within Austin's competitive co-working market. My phone buzzed with another text from Carol. David mentioned you've been working late this week. Are you taking care of yourself? Jennifer said there have been some exciting changes at your workspace. The mention of Jennifer discussing my work habits with my mother-in-law struck me as odd and slightly inappropriate. How would Jennifer even know about my schedule, and why would she be discussing it with neighbors? I made a mental note to ask David about what he might have mentioned to his mother about my recent busy period with grant writing deadlines. As I packed up my laptop at the end of the day, Sarah Thompson approached with a concerned expression. Lisa, I don't want to create drama, but did you know that Jennifer has been asking other members about your background and how long you've been here? The information sent a chill down my spine. What kind of questions? Alex mentioned that she asked him if you had any official role in the community before she started. And Mike said she seemed surprised when he told her about all the events you've organized over the years. Sarah hesitated before continuing. It felt like she was trying to understand why people keep coming to you with questions, instead of going to her directly. I thanked Sarah for the heads up while my mind raced through the implications. Jennifer's interest in my background could be simple curiosity about community dynamics, or it could indicate a more concerning pattern of viewing my informal leadership role as a threat to her authority. Either way, it suggested that the tension between us was likely to escalate rather than resolve naturally over time. Walking to my car in the Hub's parking garage, I reflected on how quickly the workplace dynamic had shifted. A month ago, Creative Hub had felt like a thriving community, where collaboration and mutual support were the norm. Now there was an undercurrent of uncertainty and restriction that was affecting not just my own experience, but the overall atmosphere that had made the space special. The drive home through Austin's early evening traffic gave me time to consider my options. I could continue to maintain my anonymity and hope that Jennifer would find her footing with appropriate guidance from Robert and the regional management team. I could begin to take a more assertive role in advocating for community-focused policies while still maintaining my cover as a concerned long-term member. Or I could consider revealing my ownership stake and taking direct action to ensure Creative Hub remained true to its founding principles. None of these options felt simple or without potential consequences. Maintaining the status quo meant accepting the gradual erosion of the community culture I had come to value. Taking a more assertive advocacy role risked escalating conflict with Jennifer and potentially damaging relationships with other members who might see me as creating unnecessary drama. Revealing my ownership would fundamentally change every relationship I had built within the Hub community and might eliminate the authentic member perspective that had been so valuable in understanding the business. As I pulled into my driveway in Cedar Park, I could see David through the kitchen window, preparing dinner while talking on his phone. The normalcy of the domestic scene provided a comforting contrast to the workplace tensions that had dominated my thoughts throughout the day. Whatever challenges Creative Hub was facing, I still had a stable foundation at home and a marriage built on honesty and mutual support. David looked up as I entered the kitchen, ending his phone call and greeting me with a smile. "How was your day at the Hub? Mom mentioned that the new manager is making some interesting changes." The casual reference to his mother's comments about Jennifer immediately brought my focus back to the odd pattern of communication between my mother-in-law and my workplace. "What exactly did your mom say about Jennifer's changes?" David shrugged while stirring something that smelled like his famous vegetable curry. "Just that she's implementing more professional policies and structure. Jennifer seems excited about bringing better organization to the workspace." He paused, looking at me more closely. "Why? Is everything okay there?" I considered how much to share about the growing tensions without creating unnecessary worry or involving David in workplace politics that I should be capable of handling myself. The new management style is pretty different from what we're used to. More rules-focused, less community-oriented. It's an adjustment for everyone. "That makes sense," David replied thoughtfully. Jennifer mentioned to Mom that she was surprised by how informal some of the previous operations were. She's probably just trying to establish more professional standards. The fact that Jennifer was discussing Creative Hub's previous operations with my mother-in-law raised new questions about boundaries and professionalism. While neighbors might naturally share general information about their work, detailed discussions about management decisions and workplace assessments seemed inappropriate, especially when those discussions involved family members of current community members. "Did Mom mention anything else about Jennifer's plans for the Hub?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual while gathering more information about these neighborhood conversations. David served the curry over rice, considering my question. She said Jennifer was impressed by how involved some of the long-term members are in community activities, but that she wants to establish clearer boundaries between member participation and management responsibilities. He looked at me with sudden understanding. Is this about your event organizing? Are you feeling displaced by the new management? His perceptive question hit closer to the truth than I was comfortable admitting. It's not about feeling displaced exactly. It's more about watching a community culture change in ways that might not serve the members' best interests. We ate dinner while discussing the challenges of organizational transitions and the delicate balance between maintaining helpful traditions and implementing necessary improvements. David's perspective as a software engineer, accustomed to evolving team dynamics and management changes, provided helpful context for thinking about the situation more objectively. After dinner, I settled into my home office to catch up on grant writing work while David watched basketball in the living room. The quiet space, decorated with photos from my nonprofit days and awards from successful community development projects, reminded me of the skills and experience I brought to community leadership. I had spent years helping organizations navigate transitions, resolve conflicts, and build sustainable collaborative cultures. Perhaps it was time to apply those skills more intentionally to the Creative Hub situation, even if it meant stepping out of my comfortable anonymity as a regular member. The question was how to do so in a way that served the community's best interests while maintaining my authentic relationships with fellow members. As I worked on a particularly complex grant proposal for a women's entrepreneurship program, my phone buzzed with an email notification from Creative Hub's management system. The subject line read, "Important policy updates for all members," with Jennifer's name in the sender field. Opening the email, I found a comprehensive list of new rules and restrictions that went far beyond the meeting room and amenity changes I had already discovered. The new policies included assigned seating arrangements for hot desk members, restrictions on personal decorations in shared spaces, mandatory quiet hours during peak productivity times, and a formal complaint process for reporting member conduct issues. Each policy was explained with professional language about creating a more productive and respectful environment, but collectively they represented a fundamental shift away from the collaborative, flexible culture that had made Creative Hub attractive to Austin's creative community. Reading through the detailed restrictions, I felt a growing sense of urgency about addressing the direction Jennifer was taking the community. These weren't minor adjustments or reasonable professional standards. They were systematic changes that would fundamentally alter the member experience and likely drive away the very people who had made Creative Hub successful. Tomorrow, I decided, it would be time to have a more direct conversation with Jennifer about the community's needs and concerns. Whether that conversation would remain within my role as a concerned long-term member or evolve into something more assertive would depend on her receptiveness to feedback and her willingness to consider the broader impact of her management decisions. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on how quickly workplace dynamics could shift and how important it was to address problematic patterns before they became entrenched. The next few days would likely determine whether Creative Hub could maintain its identity as a supportive community for Austin's creative professionals, or whether it would become just another sterile coworking facility focused more on rules than relationships. The woman who fell asleep that night was no longer the same person who had quietly accepted policy changes and redirected her community leadership role without question. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a more intentional approach to protecting the values and culture that made Creative Hub worth fighting for, regardless of the personal risks involved in that fight. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Austin mornings perfect for walking. But I found myself driving to Creative Hub instead of taking my usual stroll through the downtown streets. The email about new policies had kept me awake longer than I'd care to admit, and I wanted to arrive early enough to observe how other members were reacting to Jennifer's latest round of restrictions. The parking garage was unusually empty for 8:30 on a Tuesday, with only a handful of the regular early birds present. As I rode the elevator to the third floor, I wondered if the sparse attendance was coincidental, or if some members were already beginning to seek alternative workspace options. The thought troubled me more than it should have for someone who was supposedly just another community member. Walking through the glass doors of Creative Hub, I immediately noticed changes that hadn't been mentioned in the previous night's email. The comfortable lounge chairs near the entrance had been replaced with more formal seating arranged in rigid geometric patterns. The community bulletin board, where members had previously posted collaboration opportunities, local event announcements, and informal notes, had been cleared and now displayed only official Hub policies and Jennifer's professional headshot alongside her credentials. Mike Chen was already at his standing desk, but instead of his usual energetic morning routine, he appeared focused intently on his laptop screen with headphones firmly in place. When I waved, he acknowledged me with a quick nod but didn't remove his headphones for our typical morning conversation about weekend projects or upcoming deadlines. The change in his demeanor was subtle but noticeable to someone who had shared morning greetings with him for nearly 3 years. Sarah Thompson arrived shortly after I settled at my usual corner desk, and her expression immediately told me she had read the same policy email that had disturbed my sleep. She approached my workspace with the careful steps of someone trying not to attract unwanted attention, a behavior that would have been completely unnecessary just weeks earlier. "Did you see the assigned seating announcement?" she whispered, glancing toward the management office where Jennifer's silhouette was visible through the frosted glass. Hot desk members are supposed to check in each morning and receive their designated workspace for the day. No more claiming the same spot consistently. The policy represented everything wrong with Jennifer's approach to community management. One of the most valued aspects of Creative Hub had been the organic way members naturally established their preferred spaces, while remaining flexible enough to accommodate newcomers and changing needs. The assigned seating system would eliminate the sense of personal connection to the space while creating unnecessary administrative overhead and potential conflicts. "When does that start?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer based on Jennifer's pattern of implementing changes with minimal transition time. "Today," Sarah confirmed. "There's a check-in process at the front desk starting at 9. I guess we're supposed to surrender our current spots and wait for assignment." Her frustration was evident despite her lowered voice. "I've been working from the desk near the windows for 18 months. The lighting is perfect for my design work, and I've built relationships with the people who sit nearby. Now I'm supposed to treat it like a hotel room that changes daily?" Before I could respond, the sound of heels clicking across the polished concrete floor announced Jennifer's emergence from her office. She carried a clipboard and tablet, the tools of someone prepared to implement systematic change through careful documentation and rigid adherence to new procedures. Her outfit was impeccably professional, a navy suit that would have been appropriate for a corporate boardroom but felt oddly formal for the typically casual Creative Hub environment. "Good morning, everyone," Jennifer announced to the scattered early arrivals. "I hope you all had a chance to review the policy updates I sent yesterday. I'm excited to begin implementing these improvements to our community standards and operational efficiency." The word improvements hung in the air with the weight of unilateral decision-making. No member feedback had been solicited about what improvements might be needed or desired. No community discussion had explored how to balance structure with the flexibility that had made Creative Hub attractive to creative professionals who often worked unconventional schedules and had diverse spatial needs. As outlined in yesterday's communication, we're transitioning to a more organized approach to workspace allocation, Jennifer continued, consulting her clipboard with the satisfaction of someone who had spent considerable time preparing detailed procedures. Hot desk members will check in each morning to receive their assigned workspace, which will be determined based on availability and optimal space utilization. Alex Rodriguez raised his hand tentatively. "What about members who have client calls or specific equipment needs? Some of us have established relationships with nearby desk partners for collaboration purposes." Jennifer's response was immediate and non-negotiable. "The new system takes into account various workspace requirements through our daily allocation algorithm. Members with special needs can submit requests 24 hours in advance for consideration, though accommodation isn't guaranteed depending on space availability and fair distribution policies." The bureaucratic language was jarring in a space that had previously operated on principles of mutual respect and informal coordination. Members had traditionally worked out seating arrangements, collaboration needs, and space sharing through direct communication and natural consideration for others' work styles. Jennifer's system replaced this organic process with administrative oversight that would require more management time, while likely creating less satisfactory outcomes for everyone involved. I watched the faces of other members as they processed the implications of the new policies. Mike Chen had removed his headphones and was listening with the expression of someone trying to understand a foreign language. Sarah Thompson was taking notes, though whether for compliance or documentation purposes wasn't clear. Several other early arrivals had paused their morning setup routines to listen, and the overall energy in the space felt notably different from the usual collaborative buzz that characterized Creative Hub mornings. "I'd like to schedule individual meetings with our long-term members over the next week," Jennifer announced, her gaze sweeping across the assembled group before landing on me with particular intensity. "These conversations will help me understand each member's needs and ensure that our new policies serve everyone's professional objectives effectively." The suggestion of individual meetings felt more like mandatory interviews than the collaborative community building that had characterized Marcus's approach to member relations. I had a sudden premonition that my meeting would involve questions about my informal leadership role and possibly attempts to redirect the community connections I had naturally developed over 3 years of consistent presence and genuine engagement with fellow members. After Jennifer returned to her office to begin the daily workspace assignment process, the remaining members exchanged glances that conveyed shared confusion and concern about the direction their professional community was heading. The energy that had made Creative Hub feel like a collaborative playground for Austin's creative professionals was being systematically replaced with corporate formality that missed the point of why people chose co-working spaces over traditional offices. Sarah approached my desk again, this time with Alex following behind her. "Lisa, you've been here longer than any of us. Have you ever experienced this kind of dramatic policy shift before?" The question put me in the uncomfortable position of having perspectives, both as a long-term member and as someone with deep knowledge of co-working industry best practices, through my hidden ownership role. I chose my words carefully, aiming to be helpful without revealing information that would raise questions about my background. Marcus made changes gradually, and always involved the community in discussions before implementing new policies, I said honestly. The approach was more collaborative and less administrative. But every manager brings their own style to the role. Alex nodded thoughtfully. "The thing is, I joined Creative Hub specifically because it felt different from traditional office environments. The flexibility and community aspect were major selling points. If I wanted assigned seating and formal check-in procedures, I could have just negotiated for office space at a conventional business park." His comment highlighted the fundamental risk Jennifer's approach posed to Creative Hub's competitive position in Austin's growing co-working market. The city offered numerous workspace options, from corporate-style executive suites to ultra-casual coffee shop environments. Creative Hub had carved out a successful niche by balancing professional amenities with genuine community culture, attracting members who valued both productivity and human connection. "Maybe we should request a community meeting to discuss the changes," Sarah suggested. "If enough members express concerns about the new direction, Jennifer might be willing to consider modifications that preserve what we value most about this space." The idea had merit, though I suspected Jennifer would view any organized member feedback as a challenge to her authority, rather than valuable input for collaborative problem-solving. Her management style seemed oriented toward implementation of predetermined policies rather than adaptation based on community needs and preferences. "I think that's worth trying," I agreed. "The worst-case scenario is that she says no, but at least we'll have made our concerns known through appropriate channels." As we discussed potential approaches for community feedback, my phone buzzed with a text message from David. "Mom called this morning. Jennifer mentioned that some of the Hub members are having trouble adjusting to professional standards. She wanted to make sure you're not getting caught up in any workplace drama." The message immediately raised my alertness level. Jennifer was not only discussing Creative Hub operations with my mother-in-law, but was specifically framing member concerns as resistance to professional standards, rather than legitimate feedback about community management. The characterization was both inaccurate and concerning, suggesting that Jennifer viewed any questioning of her policies as problematic, rather than normal community engagement. I texted back quickly. "No drama here, just normal adjustment period with new management. We'll call Mom later to reassure her." The fact that Jennifer was positioning herself as the voice of professionalism while portraying member concerns as drama to outside parties felt like a significant escalation in the developing conflict. It also suggested that she was more aware of the community resistance to her changes than her professional demeanor in the office indicated. Around 10:30, Jennifer emerged from her office with a list and began implementing the new daily check-in process. Members were required to approach her desk, provide their membership information, and receive their assigned workspace for the day. The process was efficient but impersonal, eliminating the natural flow that had allowed people to settle into their preferred spots while maintaining awareness of space availability for newcomers. I watched as Mike Chen was assigned to a desk near the coffee machine, an area he typically avoided because the constant foot traffic disrupted his concentration during design work. Sarah Thompson was placed at a table designed for collaboration rather than individual work, forcing her to adapt her carefully organized workflow to furniture that didn't support her professional needs. The assignment seemed random rather than based on any understanding of how different members used the space effectively. When my turn came, I approached Jennifer's temporary check-in station with curiosity about how she would handle assigning my historically consistent corner workspace. Her smile was professionally pleasant, but didn't reach her eyes as she consulted her tablet and clipboard. Lisa Martinez, correct? You've been with us for 3 years according to your membership records. She made several notes before looking up. I'm assigning you to the collaborative table near the windows today. It's time for some of our long-term members to experience different areas of the workspace and make room for newer members to establish their own routines. The assignment was clearly intentional rather than random. Jennifer was deliberately moving me away from the corner desk that had become associated with my informal community leadership role. The message was subtle but unmistakable. The natural authority I had developed through consistent presence and helpful engagement with other members was being systematically dismantled through administrative control over my physical presence in the space. The collaborative table works fine, I replied evenly, accepting the assignment without protest while mentally noting the power play behind the decision. Should I expect a different assignment tomorrow, or will there be some consistency for members who need predictable setups for their work? The system will optimize assignments based on daily availability and community needs, Jennifer replied, maintaining her professional tone while avoiding a direct answer about predictability. Part of the benefit of a more organized approach is that everyone gets to experience different perspectives and opportunities for new connections. The explanation sounded reasonable in isolation, but ignored the reality that creative professionals often had specific environmental needs for optimal productivity. Writers might need quiet corners, designers required good lighting, and people with frequent video calls needed spaces with appropriate acoustic properties. Jennifer's system treated all workspace needs as identical and interchangeable, missing the nuanced understanding that had made Marcus's informal coordination so effective. I settled at the assigned collaborative table, arranging my laptop and materials in the bright space near the windows. The location offered excellent natural light and a good view of the main workspace, though the furniture was designed for group meetings rather than individual work. The chair was uncomfortable for extended typing, and the table height wasn't optimal for laptop use, but the assignment was manageable for a day. More concerning than the physical discomfort was the symbolic message Jennifer was sending to the broader community. By displacing the most established and helpful members from their preferred spaces, she was demonstrating that seniority, community contribution, and informal leadership were not valued under her management approach. The message would not be lost on other members who had appreciated the organic community culture that had developed over Creative Hub's 3-year history. As the morning progressed, I observed the effects of the new assignment system on overall community dynamics. Conversations that had naturally occurred between desk neighbors were disrupted, as people found themselves in unfamiliar locations. Collaborative partnerships that had developed through proximity were broken up, requiring extra effort to maintain productive working relationships. The spontaneous interactions that had made Creative Hub feel like a genuine community were replaced by a more formal, isolated atmosphere that resembled a traditional office environment. Around noon, Sarah Thompson approached my temporary workspace with visible frustration. "This isn't working," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure Jennifer wasn't within hearing range. "I've spent the entire morning trying to adapt my workflow to a space that doesn't support what I do. The lighting is wrong for color work, the table is too small for spreading out design materials, and I'm next to someone who's on phone calls constantly. I nodded sympathetically while considering the broader implications of what she was describing. Have you mentioned the specific challenges to Jennifer? Maybe if she understands the practical impact on productivity, she'd be willing to make adjustments. Sarah's expression suggested she had little confidence in that approach. I tried to explain about the lighting requirements for design work, and she told me that adapting to different environments would make me a more flexible professional. She seems to think that any resistance to her system is just reluctance to embrace change. The characterization was troubling because it dismissed legitimate professional needs as personal preferences or stubborn resistance to improvement. Effective community management required understanding that different types of work had different environmental requirements, and that member satisfaction depended on supporting rather than disrupting productive work habits. What if we document specific productivity impacts and present them as data rather than complaints? I suggested. Sometimes management responds better to objective information about efficiency and outcomes than to subjective feedback about preferences. The suggestion felt familiar from my nonprofit leadership days, when I had needed to advocate for policy changes with boards or funders who were more convinced by metrics than by anecdotal evidence. If Jennifer was committed to data-driven decision-making, perhaps approaching the conversation from that angle would be more effective than focusing on community satisfaction concerns. Sarah considered the idea thoughtfully. That could work. I can track my billable hour efficiency in different workspace configurations. If several of us document productivity impacts, it might carry more weight than individual complaints about desk assignments. As we discussed potential strategies for productive engagement with Jennifer's management style, my phone rang with a call from Robert Kim, the CEO of Austin Workspace Solutions. The timing was unexpected, and I stepped away from the collaborative table to take the call privately near the elevator bank. Lisa, I hope I'm not interrupting your workday again. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday about the transition at Creative Hub. We've received additional feedback from members, and I'm hoping you might have some updated observations to share. The call confirmed that other members were indeed reaching out to corporate management about Jennifer's policy changes. While I was relieved that concerns were being escalated through appropriate channels, I was also worried about the potential for Jennifer to view member complaints as coordinated resistance rather than legitimate feedback about community management. The new policies are definitely having an impact on daily operations, I said carefully. The assigned seating system is disrupting established work patterns and collaborative relationships. Some members are struggling to maintain productivity in spaces that don't support their specific professional needs. Robert was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him taking notes. Can you give me some specific examples of productivity impacts? I want to understand the practical consequences rather than just general satisfaction concerns. I outlined the challenges Sarah had described with design work requiring specific lighting conditions, Mike's concentration issues when placed near high-traffic areas, and the broader disruption to collaborative partnerships that had developed organically over time. Robert listened attentively, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his genuine interest in understanding the operational effects of Jennifer's management approach. This is very helpful context, Lisa. We're committed to ensuring that Creative Hub maintains its reputation as a supportive community for creative professionals. I'm planning to schedule a site visit later this week to observe operations firsthand and meet with Jennifer about balancing structure with community needs. The news was encouraging, though I wondered how Jennifer would respond to corporate oversight of her management decisions. Based on her interactions with member feedback, I suspected she might view executive attention as validation of her policies, rather than an opportunity for collaborative problem-solving. After ending the call, I returned to the collaborative table where Alex Rodriguez had joined Sarah Thompson for an impromptu conversation about their morning experiences with the new workspace assignments. Both looked frustrated but were clearly trying to maintain professional attitudes despite their concerns about the direction Creative Hub was heading. "Any luck with your corporate contact?" Sarah asked quietly, referring to my phone conversation with Robert. "They're aware of the concerns and planning to assess the situation directly," I replied honestly. Change can be challenging for everyone involved, but hopefully there's room for adjustments that serve both operational efficiency and member satisfaction. Alex nodded hopefully. I really want this to work out. Creative Hub has been such a positive part of my professional life in Austin. The community connections I've made here have led to 2 major client relationships and countless smaller collaborations. I'd hate to see that culture disappear because of administrative policies that don't take into account what actually makes this space valuable. His comment highlighted the stakes involved in the current management transition. Creative Hub wasn't just a workspace for most members. It was a professional community that provided networking opportunities, collaborative partnerships, and the kind of supportive environment that could be particularly valuable for freelancers and entrepreneurs who might otherwise work in isolation. As the afternoon progressed, I observed Jennifer making rounds through the workspace with her clipboard, documenting compliance with the new policies, and making notes about member behavior and space utilization. Her approach was systematic and professional, but it felt more like surveillance than community engagement. The contrast with Marcus's style of casual check-ins and spontaneous conversations with members was stark and concerning. Around 3 o'clock, Jennifer approached my temporary workspace with a professional smile and her ever-present tablet. Lisa, I'd like to schedule that individual meeting we discussed this morning. Would tomorrow afternoon work for your schedule? The timing felt rushed, particularly given that Robert had mentioned planning a site visit later in the week. I suspected Jennifer wanted to address my informal community role before any corporate oversight might complicate her management approach. Tomorrow afternoon should work. What time did you have in mind? How about 2 o'clock in the conference room? I've set aside an hour to discuss your membership experience and how we can ensure the new policies support your professional objectives effectively. The formal language and scheduled duration suggested this would be more interrogation than conversation. I accepted the meeting time while mentally preparing for what felt like it could be a significant confrontation about my role within the Creative Hub community. As I packed up my belongings at the end of the day, I reflected on how quickly the atmosphere at Creative Hub had shifted under Jennifer's management. The energy that had made the space feel like a vibrant professional community was being systematically replaced with corporate formality that missed the essential human elements that had made the co-working model successful. Walking to my car in the parking garage, I encountered Mike Chen loading his equipment into his vehicle with the slow, deliberate movements of someone reconsidering their daily routine. Rough day? I asked, though his expression had already provided the answer. I'm thinking about exploring other workspace options, he admitted reluctantly. This morning's desk assignment was in a location where I couldn't concentrate because of constant interruptions. When I asked Jennifer about the possibility of requesting specific areas based on work requirements, she explained that flexibility and adaptation were important professional skills. Mike's frustration was evident, and his consideration of alternative workspaces represented exactly the kind of member attrition that would ultimately undermine Creative Hub's business model. Co-working spaces succeeded by creating environments where members wanted to spend time and felt supported in their professional endeavors. When policies prioritized administrative convenience over member satisfaction, the natural result was declining retention and difficulty attracting new members through positive word-of-mouth referrals. Give it a few more days, I suggested, though I wasn't certain whether I was trying to encourage Mike or buy time for potential improvements in management approach. Sometimes transitions take longer to settle than anyone expects. Mike nodded politely but without conviction. I hope you're right. This place has meant a lot to me professionally and personally. I'd hate to lose that because of policies that don't seem to understand what makes community workspaces actually work. Driving home through Austin's afternoon traffic, I found myself thinking about the individual meeting Jennifer had scheduled for tomorrow. The conversation would likely determine whether the growing tensions at Creative Hub could be resolved through communication and compromise, or whether more direct action would be necessary to protect the community culture that had made the space valuable to so many creative professionals. The stakes felt higher than they should for what was ostensibly just a workplace disagreement between a community member and a manager. But Creative Hub represented more than just a business operation. It was a professional home for dozens of people who depended on its supportive environment for their livelihood and career development. The responsibility I felt toward preserving that environment was weighing more heavily on my conscience as I watched Jennifer's policies systematically undermine everything that had made the community successful. Tomorrow's meeting would require careful navigation between advocating for community needs and maintaining my anonymity as a regular member. The conversation could potentially resolve the growing tensions through mutual understanding and collaborative problem solving, or it could escalate into the kind of conflict that would force me to consider revealing my ownership stake and taking more direct action to protect Creative Hub's founding principles. As I pulled into my driveway, I could see David through the kitchen window, probably starting dinner preparations while reviewing work emails on his laptop. The domestic normalcy provided a welcome contrast to the professional tensions that had dominated my day, though I knew I would need to update him about the evolving situation at Creative Hub and the concerning pattern of Jennifer's communications with his mother about workplace matters. The evening ahead would provide an opportunity to process the day's events and prepare for tomorrow's potentially pivotal conversation with Jennifer. Whatever the outcome of that meeting, it was becoming clear that the current trajectory at Creative Hub was unsustainable, and that someone needed to take responsibility for steering the community back toward the collaborative culture that had made it thrive. The question was whether that someone could remain Lisa Martinez, concerned long-term member, or whether the situation would ultimately require the intervention of Lisa Martinez, majority shareholder and ultimate decision-maker for Creative Hub's future direction. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of tension that precedes important conversations, and I found myself selecting my outfit with unusual care. The navy blazer and cream blouse struck the right balance between professional respect and quiet confidence, appropriate for what I suspected would be a challenging discussion with Jennifer about my role within the Creative Hub community. Arriving at the workspace earlier than usual, I noticed immediate changes that hadn't been announced in any email or policy update. The community coffee station had been relocated to a less central position, replaced by a formal reception desk where Jennifer sat with her laptop and scheduling materials. The open, welcoming atmosphere that had characterized Creative Hub's entrance was being systematically transformed into something that resembled a corporate office lobby. "Good morning, Lisa," Jennifer called out as I approached the new check-in station. Her tone was professionally pleasant, but carried an undertone of anticipation that suggested she had been looking forward to our scheduled meeting. "I hope you're prepared for our conversation this afternoon. I've been reviewing your membership history and community involvement quite thoroughly." The comment about reviewing my history sent a small chill down my spine. What exactly had Jennifer discovered in her research, and why did she feel the need to investigate my background so extensively? As a regular member, my interactions should have been straightforward and transparent, requiring no special analysis or documentation. "I'm looking forward to our discussion," I replied evenly, accepting my assigned workspace location for the day. To my surprise, she had placed me back at my usual corner desk, a decision that felt calculated rather than coincidental. Perhaps she wanted me in a comfortable environment for what she anticipated would be an uncomfortable conversation. As I settled into my familiar workspace, I observed the morning dynamics with heightened awareness. Several regular members were notably absent, including 2 freelancers who had been consistent daily users for over a year. The collaborative energy that typically built throughout the morning felt muted, with people working in isolation rather than engaging in the spontaneous conversations and mutual support that had characterized Creative Hub culture. Mike Chen arrived looking harried and immediately approached Jennifer's reception desk with what appeared to be a formal complaint or request. Their conversation was conducted in low tones, but Mike's body language suggested frustration while Jennifer maintained her professional composure without showing any indication of accommodation or problem-solving collaboration. Sarah Thompson caught my attention from across the room, gesturing subtly toward the coffee area where we could speak more privately. I gathered my things and joined her, curious about what she had observed or experienced since yesterday's policy implementations. 3 more people canceled their memberships yesterday, Sarah whispered, glancing around to ensure our conversation remained confidential. Alex Rodriguez stopped by after hours to clean out his desk. He said he found a shared office space in South Austin that better fits his workflow needs. The news about Alex's departure hit me harder than I had expected. He had been one of the most enthusiastic community members, frequently organizing informal collaboration sessions and serving as an unofficial welcome committee for new members. His decision to leave represented exactly the kind of talent drain that would ultimately undermine Creative Hub's reputation and financial stability. Did he mention any specific issues that influenced his decision? I asked, though I suspected the answer would confirm my concerns about Jennifer's management approach, driving away the very people who made the community valuable. He said the assigned seating policy made it impossible to maintain the collaborative partnerships he had developed here. When he requested accommodation for a client project that required consistent workspace setup, Jennifer told him that flexibility and adaptation were essential business skills. Sarah paused, clearly frustrated by the response Alex had received. He felt like his specific professional needs weren't being considered or valued. The pattern was becoming clear and concerning. Jennifer's approach prioritized administrative control over member satisfaction, treating Creative Hub like a traditional office facility rather than a community-focused coworking space. The policies might create operational efficiency from a management perspective, but they were systematically eliminating the qualities that had made the space attractive to creative professionals. As we returned to our respective workstations, I noticed Jennifer watching our interaction with the focused attention of someone gathering intelligence rather than simply observing community dynamics. Her scrutiny felt invasive and suggested that she viewed member conversations as potential challenges to her authority rather than normal community engagement. The morning progressed with unusual quiet, broken only by the mechanical sounds of typing and occasional phone conversations conducted in hushed tones. The vibrant collaborative atmosphere that had made Creative Hub feel alive and inspiring was being replaced by the sterile efficiency of a traditional office environment where people worked in isolation rather than connection. Around 11:30, my phone buzzed with a text from Carol, my mother-in-law. Jennifer mentioned you have a meeting with her today. She seems quite impressed by your involvement in the workspace community. I hope everything goes well. The message confirmed that Jennifer was continuing to discuss Creative Hub matters with Carol, including specific information about my scheduled meeting. The level of detail she was sharing with a neighbor about workplace interactions felt inappropriate and raised questions about her professional boundaries and discretion regarding member privacy. I texted back briefly, "Thanks for the good wishes." Just a routine check-in about community feedback. I chose not to mention my concerns about Jennifer's communication patterns, preferring to address that issue directly during our afternoon conversation if the opportunity arose naturally. As 2 o'clock approached, I gathered my materials and made my way to the conference room where Jennifer had scheduled our meeting. The space had been rearranged since I had last used it for a client presentation, with a more formal layout that positioned chairs across from each other rather than in the collaborative arrangement that had been standard under Marcus's management. Jennifer arrived precisely on time, carrying a thick folder and her tablet, suggesting she had prepared extensively for our conversation. Her professional demeanor was impeccable, but there was an undercurrent of tension that suggested she viewed this meeting as more significant than routine member feedback collection. "Thank you for taking time from your workday, Lisa," she began, settling into the chair across from me and opening her folder with deliberate precision. "As I mentioned yesterday, I'm conducting individual meetings with our long-term members to better understand community dynamics and ensure our new policies serve everyone's professional objectives effectively." The formal language felt oddly stilted for what should have been a straightforward conversation between a community manager and a member. Jennifer's approach suggested she was following a script or predetermined agenda, rather than engaging in genuine dialogue about community needs and member satisfaction. "I appreciate the opportunity to share feedback," I replied, maintaining a collaborative tone while observing her preparations with growing curiosity about what specific topics she planned to address. Creative Hub has been an important part of my professional life in Austin for 3 years now. Jennifer consulted her notes before looking up with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, 3 years is quite a tenure for our community. During that time, you've taken on what might be described as an unofficial leadership role among the members. Can you help me understand how that role developed and what specific activities it has involved?" The question felt like the beginning of an interrogation, rather than a collaborative discussion about community engagement. Jennifer's tone suggested she had already formed opinions about my involvement and was seeking information to support predetermined conclusions, rather than genuinely exploring how to maintain positive community dynamics. I think, quote, leadership role might be overstating things, I said carefully. I've been here consistently for several years, so newer members sometimes ask questions about policies or seek introductions to other members with complementary skills. It's the kind of informal networking that happens naturally in any collaborative environment. Jennifer made several notes before continuing. I've spoken with various members about community dynamics, and there seems to be a pattern of people directing questions and concerns to you rather than bringing them to official management channels. From an operational perspective, this creates confusion about authority and undermines the formal support structure we're trying to establish. Her characterization revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of how healthy communities functioned. The informal networks and peer support that developed organically in coworking spaces were features, not bugs, of successful community building. Attempting to channel all interactions through formal management would eliminate the spontaneous collaboration and mutual assistance that made these environments valuable to creative professionals. I understand your concern about clear communication channels, I replied thoughtfully. At the same time, peer support and informal networking are often cited as primary benefits of co-working communities. Perhaps there's a way to maintain both formal management accessibility and the organic member connections that have developed naturally. Jennifer's expression suggested she viewed my response as resistance rather than constructive feedback. The challenge is that informal authority can conflict with official policies and create inconsistent member experiences. When long-term members provide guidance or make suggestions about workspace use, newer members may receive information that doesn't align with current management decisions. The conversation was moving in a direction that felt increasingly confrontational rather than collaborative. Jennifer seemed determined to position my community involvement as problematic, rather than exploring how to integrate organic member leadership with effective management oversight. Can you give me a specific example of conflicting information? I asked, genuinely curious about what incidents had prompted her concerns. I certainly don't want to create confusion or undermine your management efforts. Jennifer consulted her folder again, extracting several printed pages that appeared to be emails or meeting notes. Yesterday morning, you encouraged Sarah Thompson and Alex Rodriguez to document productivity concerns about the new workspace assignment policies. This could be interpreted as organizing member resistance to management decisions, rather than encouraging direct communication with appropriate authorities. The accusation took me by surprise, both for its accuracy in describing our conversation and for its interpretation of collaborative problem-solving as inappropriate resistance. Jennifer had clearly been monitoring member interactions more closely than anyone had realized, documenting conversations and analyzing them for signs of dissent or challenge to her authority. I suggested that data-driven feedback might be more effective than anecdotal complaints, I clarified. Many managers appreciate objective information about policy impacts rather than subjective expressions of dissatisfaction. I was trying to help members communicate their concerns in ways that might lead to productive dialogue. The issue isn't the format of feedback, Lisa. The issue is that you're positioning yourself as an intermediary between members and management rather than encouraging direct communication. This creates an unofficial hierarchy that competes with formal management structure. Jennifer's analysis revealed the core of our conflict. She viewed any member influence or informal leadership as a threat to her authority, rather than recognizing how peer networks and community self-organization could support and enhance effective management. Her approach would eliminate the collaborative culture that had made Creative Hub successful in favor of rigid hierarchy that treated members like employees rather than community participants. I see the concern, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully as I recognized that this conversation was moving towards some kind of ultimatum or confrontation. What would you suggest as the appropriate way for long-term members to share their experience and knowledge with newer community participants? Jennifer closed her folder and leaned forward slightly, her professional mask slipping enough to reveal the determination underneath. I think the most appropriate approach would be for you to step back from any advisory or coordination activities and focus on your own professional work. The community will function more effectively when members understand that management guidance comes through official channels, rather than informal networks. The request was reasonable in its wording but devastating in its implications. Jennifer was asking me to abandon the community connections and supportive relationships that had made Creative Hub meaningful to me and valuable to dozens of other members. She was prioritizing administrative control over the collaborative culture that had attracted people to the space in the first place. That's certainly one approach, I replied carefully, buying time to consider my response while recognizing that this moment might require more honesty about my position than I had planned to reveal. Can I ask what prompted this particular concern? Has there been specific feedback about confusion or problems related to member networking? Jennifer's smile became more genuine, suggesting she felt she was gaining control of the conversation. Let's just say that maintaining clear boundaries between member participation and management responsibility is essential for operational effectiveness. I'm sure you understand the importance of supporting official policies rather than creating alternative guidance structures. The veiled threat was becoming explicit. Jennifer was requiring my compliance with her vision of community management, which excluded the organic leadership and peer support that had made Creative Hub thrive. She was demanding that I choose between maintaining my community connections and avoiding conflict with her administrative approach. I appreciate your perspective, I said finally, recognizing that the conversation had reached a crucial decision point. However, I think there may be some things about Creative Hub's history and operations that you're not aware of, which might influence how you think about community dynamics and member engagement. Jennifer's expression shifted to one of sharp attention. What kind of things? The moment had arrived when my anonymity as a regular member was no longer serving the community's best interests. Jennifer's policies were systematically destroying the collaborative culture that had made Creative Hub successful, and her approach to member concerns suggested she would not respond to feedback delivered through normal channels. If I wanted to protect the community that had become important to me and dozens of other creative professionals, I needed to reveal information that would fundamentally change our relationship. I think you should know that I'm not just a long-term member of Creative Hub, I said quietly, watching her expression carefully as I prepared to transform our entire dynamic with a few strategic words. I'm actually the majority shareholder of Austin Workspace Solutions, which means I ultimately own this facility and have final authority over its management policies. The silence that followed my revelation was profound and electric. Jennifer's professional composure cracked completely, her eyes widening as she processed the implications of what I had just told her. The careful power dynamic she had been constructing, with herself as the authority figure requiring my compliance, had just been completely inverted. "You're what?" she asked, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself and attempted to return to professional volume. "That's not possible. You're just a freelance grant writer who works from a hot desk membership. I've been conducting an extended assessment of Creative Hub's operations as a member rather than as an owner," I explained calmly. "My father founded Austin Workspace Solutions, and I inherited controlling interest in the company 3 years ago. I chose to experience the facility as a regular member to understand what made it successful before taking any active role in management decisions." Jennifer stared at me with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just shifted. The folder of notes and documentation she had prepared for our meeting suddenly represented evidence of her systematic dismantling of policies that the actual owner had observed and valued. Her confident assertions about proper management structure had been delivered to the person with ultimate authority to evaluate and override her decisions. "If that's true," she said slowly, clearly struggling to recalibrate our entire conversation, "why didn't you identify yourself when I was hired? Why let me implement these changes if you disagreed with them?" The question was fair and revealed the complexity of the situation I had created through my decision to remain anonymous. I wanted to see how you would approach community management without interference or preconceptions about my preferences. The previous manager, Marcus, had developed an effective collaborative approach, and I was curious whether your background would bring valuable new perspectives to the role. Jennifer's expression cycled through confusion, embarrassment, and what appeared to be growing anger as she realized the implications of my revelation. "So this entire meeting was some kind of test? You've been watching me make changes and documenting my performance without giving me the information I needed to do my job effectively?" Her interpretation contained some validity, though it missed the broader point about community impact and member satisfaction. "The changes you've implemented have had significant effects on member retention and community culture. 3 long-term members have canceled their memberships in the past week, and several others are considering alternative workspace options. These aren't abstract policy disagreements. They're business outcomes that affect Creative Hub's sustainability and reputation. "You should have told me who you were from the beginning," Jennifer said, her professional composure dissolving into frustration and defensiveness. "How was I supposed to know that my management approach wasn't aligned with ownership expectations?" The question highlighted a fundamental difference in our perspectives on community management. Jennifer viewed member feedback and community culture as secondary to administrative efficiency, while I had learned through 3 years of observation that Creative Hub's success depended on maintaining the collaborative environment that attracted creative professionals to choose this workspace over numerous alternatives. Effective community management shouldn't require ownership oversight to prioritize member satisfaction, I replied gently. The feedback you've received from members about policy impacts should have been sufficient information to guide your approach. Community managers in successful coworking spaces typically adapt their strategies based on member needs rather than requiring external validation for member-focused decisions. Jennifer gathered her materials with sharp, efficient movements that suggested she was preparing to leave the conversation rather than engage with the complex issues my revelation had raised. "I need time to process this information and consider how it affects my position here." "Of course," I agreed. "Take whatever time you need." However, I should mention that Robert Kim is planning a site visit later this week to assess member satisfaction and community dynamics. You might want to consider how recent policy changes align with Austin Workspace Solutions' overall mission and business model. The mention of corporate oversight clearly added another layer of pressure to Jennifer's already complicated situation. She had not only been implementing policies that the actual owner disagreed with, but she was also facing evaluation from the CEO, who had hired her based on member complaints about her management approach. "Will you be participating in that evaluation as a member or as an owner?" she asked, the question carrying implications about whether I plan to maintain my anonymity or take a more direct role in addressing the management issues that had developed. "That depends on how the next few days unfold," I said honestly. "My primary concern is ensuring that Creative Hub continues to serve Austin's creative community effectively. Whether that requires owner intervention or can be accomplished through collaborative management adjustment remains to be seen." Jennifer stood abruptly, gathering her folder and tablet with movements that suggested barely controlled frustration. "I need to think about all of this. Can we continue this conversation tomorrow?" "Absolutely," I agreed, recognizing that she needed time to process the dramatic shift in our relationship and the implications for her management approach. "I'll be here working as usual." After Jennifer left the conference room, I remained seated for several minutes, processing the significance of what had just occurred. The decision to reveal my ownership stake had been necessary to protect Creative Hub's community culture, but it had also fundamentally changed every relationship I had built within the workspace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as word of my true identity spread, and members reconsidered our 3 years of interactions through the lens of my hidden authority. The revelation also meant that my period of anonymous observation was ending. Whether Jennifer adapted her management approach or chose to leave her position, I would need to take a more direct role in ensuring Creative Hub's continued success as a supportive community for creative professionals. The responsibility felt heavier now that it was acknowledged rather than hidden, but also clearer in its purpose and urgency. Walking back through the main workspace, I observed the quiet, isolated atmosphere that had replaced the collaborative energy that had made Creative Hub special. The challenge ahead would be restoring that community culture while maintaining the professional standards and operational efficiency that were also important for long-term success. It would require careful balance and collaborative leadership rather than the administrative control that Jennifer had prioritized. As I gathered my belongings at the end of the day, several members approached with questions and concerns about recent policy changes, unaware that their conversations were now with the person who had ultimate authority to address their issues. Tomorrow would bring new dynamics and responsibilities. As Creative Hub began the process of rediscovering its identity as a genuine community, rather than just a professionally managed workspace facility. The drive home through Austin's afternoon traffic provided time to consider how to share this development with David and prepare for the complex conversations that would follow Robert Kim's site visit. The hidden chapter of my involvement with Creative Hub was ending, but the more challenging work of collaborative community leadership was just beginning. Thursday morning arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation that permeated Creative Hub from the moment I walked through the glass doors. Word of my revelation to Jennifer had clearly spread, though the details seemed to have been filtered through speculation and incomplete information. Members who had previously approached me casually now seemed uncertain about appropriate boundaries, while others watched our interactions with the curiosity of people witnessing an unfolding drama. Jennifer was already stationed at her reception desk when I arrived, but her demeanor had transformed overnight from confident authority to careful professionalism tinged with visible anxiety. She looked up as I approached the check-in station, her expression cycling through acknowledgement, uncertainty, and what appeared to be determination to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. "Good morning, Lisa," she said, her voice carrying the strained politeness of someone navigating completely unfamiliar territory. "I've given considerable thought to our conversation yesterday. I think there are some important clarifications we need to discuss before Mr. Kim's visit this afternoon." The mention of Robert's site visit being moved up to today caught my attention immediately. "He's coming today? I thought the evaluation was scheduled for later in the week." Jennifer's smile was tight and professional, but didn't conceal her underlying stress. "I contacted him yesterday evening to request an earlier meeting. Given the new information about ownership structure and community dynamics, I felt it was important to address any concerns promptly rather than allowing speculation to affect daily operations." Her decision to accelerate the corporate evaluation suggested she was attempting to control the narrative about recent events rather than allowing them to unfold naturally. I wondered what version of our conversation she had shared with Robert, and how she planned to position herself in relation to the revelation about my ownership stake. "That's very proactive," I replied neutrally, accepting the workspace assignment she handed me without looking at the location. "I'm sure Robert will appreciate your initiative in addressing community concerns directly." As I settled at my assigned desk, which happened to be my usual corner location, I observed the morning dynamics with heightened awareness of how yesterday's revelation was affecting interpersonal relationships within the workspace. Mike Chen approached with visible hesitation, before speaking in a voice carefully modulated to avoid attracting attention from other members. "Lisa, there are rumors circulating about your actual role here. People are saying you're not just a member but have some kind of ownership connection. Is there truth to that?" The direct question required careful handling. While I had revealed my position to Jennifer, I hadn't made any public announcement about my ownership stake, and members deserved honest information about who they were dealing with on a daily basis. "Yes, that's accurate," I confirmed quietly. I inherited majority ownership of Austin Workspace Solutions 3 years ago, and chose to experience Creative Hub as a regular member to understand what made the community successful before taking any active management role. Mike's expression shifted through surprise, understanding, and what appeared to be relief. "That explains why you always seem to understand community dynamics so naturally. It also makes me feel more optimistic about the recent policy changes. If you've been observing how they affect actual member experience, presumably adjustments can be made based on real feedback rather than administrative theory." His response highlighted exactly why I had chosen to maintain anonymity for 3 years. As a regular member, I had gained authentic insights into what made Creative Hub valuable to creative professionals. As an acknowledged owner, my presence would inevitably change how people interacted with me and with each other, potentially eliminating the genuine community dynamics I had worked to preserve. The goal is definitely to ensure Creative Hub continues serving Austin's creative community effectively, I assured him. Yesterday's conversation with Jennifer was about finding ways to balance operational efficiency with the collaborative culture that attracts people to coworking spaces. Sarah Thompson joined our conversation with the tentative approach of someone uncertain about appropriate protocols for speaking with someone whose role had suddenly shifted from peer to authority figure. Does this mean the assigned seating policy and other recent restrictions might be reconsidered? Several of us have been struggling with productivity impacts from the new workspace allocation system. Before I could respond, Jennifer's voice carried across the main workspace with professional authority that sounded slightly forced. "Good morning, everyone. I wanted to let you know that Robert Kim, our CEO, will be visiting this afternoon to meet with members and assess our community operations. Please feel free to share any feedback or suggestions that might help us continue improving your Creative Hub experience. The announcement was strategically timed to position Jennifer as facilitating member input rather than avoiding it, though her management approach over the past month had suggested limited interest in community feedback. I suspected her sudden embrace of member engagement was more about damage control than genuine collaborative leadership. As the morning progressed, I found myself in the unusual position of being approached by multiple members seeking clarification about my role and reassurance about Creative Hub's future direction. The conversations were uniformly positive, with people expressing relief that someone with authentic understanding of community needs had influence over management decisions. Around 11 o'clock, my phone rang with a call from Robert Kim. His voice carried the professional warmth I remembered from our previous conversations, but with an undertone of curiosity that suggested Jennifer's communication had raised questions about the dynamics at Creative Hub. Lisa, I hope I'm not interrupting your work. Jennifer contacted me yesterday with some interesting information about ownership structure and community leadership that I'd like to discuss before my site visit this afternoon. The careful phrasing suggested Robert was seeking my perspective on whatever Jennifer had told him, possibly to verify information or understand context that might have been missing from her account. Of course, I replied, stepping toward the elevator bank for privacy. What specific information would be helpful? Jennifer mentioned that you've been conducting an extended assessment of Creative Hub operations in your capacity as majority shareholder. She seemed surprised by this arrangement and concerned about how it might affect her management authority and decision-making processes. Robert's summary was diplomatic, but clearly indicated that Jennifer had presented my revelation as problematic rather than informative. I suspected she had framed my anonymous observation as deceptive oversight, rather than genuine commitment to understanding community needs from a member perspective. The assessment has been valuable for understanding what makes Creative Hub successful from a member experience standpoint, I explained honestly. However, recent policy changes have raised concerns about maintaining the collaborative culture that attracts creative professionals to choose our facility over other workspace options. Can you elaborate on those concerns? Jennifer indicated that some members have been resistant to operational improvements designed to enhance professionalism and efficiency. The characterization revealed how Jennifer had positioned member feedback as resistance, rather than legitimate concerns about community impact. Her framing suggested she viewed collaboration between management and members as undermining authority rather than improving outcomes. The issue isn't resistance to improvement, but rather the specific nature of the changes and their implementation without community input, I clarified. Policies like assigned seating allocation and restricted amenity access have disrupted established work patterns and collaborative relationships that took years to develop. Several long-term members have canceled their memberships rather than adapt to management approaches that don't support their professional needs. Robert was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him taking notes. Member retention is obviously a key performance indicator for our facilities. What would you recommend as priorities for this afternoon's assessment? Focus on understanding how recent policy changes have affected daily member experience and productivity. Talk to people who have been here for different lengths of time about what originally attracted them to Creative Hub and how their experience has evolved under the new management approach. After ending the call, I returned to my workspace with a clearer sense of how the afternoon evaluation would unfold. Robert would need to balance Jennifer's perspective on operational efficiency with member feedback about community culture and practical policy impacts. The conversation would likely determine whether Jennifer's management approach could be modified to serve community needs, or whether more significant changes would be necessary. Around noon, Jennifer approached my desk with visible determination, carrying her tablet and a folder that appeared to contain prepared materials for Robert's visit. Her expression suggested she wanted to establish some understanding or agreement before the corporate evaluation began. Lisa, I'd like to discuss how we present recent developments to Mr. Kim this afternoon. I think it's important that we provide a unified perspective on community management and operational improvements. The request for unified presentation felt like an attempt to control how my ownership revelation and our policy disagreements would be characterized during the evaluation. Jennifer seemed to want assurance that I wouldn't undermine her authority or contradict her management decisions in front of the CEO who had hired her. I think the most helpful approach would be honest, individual conversations that allow Robert to understand different perspectives on Creative Hub's community dynamics. I replied carefully. Members, management, and ownership each bring valuable insights that contribute to a complete assessment. Jennifer's expression tightened slightly, suggesting my response wasn't the collaborative agreement she had hoped to secure. I'm concerned that conflicting information might create confusion about management authority and operational direction. It would be more professional to coordinate our feedback rather than presenting potentially contradictory viewpoints. Her concern about conflicting information revealed the fundamental problem with her management approach. Rather than viewing diverse perspectives as valuable input for collaborative decision-making, she saw them as threats to administrative control that needed to be managed and coordinated, rather than understood and integrated. I understand your concern, I said diplomatically. However, Robert's assessment will be most valuable if it reflects authentic community dynamics, rather than coordinated presentations. The goal is improving Creative Hub's effectiveness, not managing impressions about current policies. Before Jennifer could respond, the elevator announced Robert Kim's arrival 30 minutes earlier than his scheduled appointment. His presence immediately shifted the energy in the workspace as members recognized him from previous corporate communications, and Jennifer moved quickly to intercept him before he could begin unstructured conversations with community members. Mr. Kim, welcome to Creative Hub, Jennifer said with professional enthusiasm, positioning herself as his primary guide for the site visit. I've prepared a comprehensive overview of recent operational improvements and member satisfaction metrics that I think you'll find very encouraging. Robert accepted her greeting politely but maintained the observational awareness of an experienced executive assessing organizational dynamics. His eyes swept the workspace, taking in the formal reception desk, the reconfigured seating arrangements, and the subdued atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the vibrant community energy that had characterized Creative Hub during previous visits. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm looking forward to understanding how recent changes have affected member experience and community engagement. He paused, scanning the workspace until he located me at my corner desk. Lisa, would you have a few minutes to share your perspective as a long-term member? The invitation to participate in the evaluation immediately established that Robert viewed me as a valuable source of information rather than deferring entirely to Jennifer's management perspective. Her expression suggested this wasn't the controlled assessment process she had envisioned. Of course, I replied, gathering my materials and joining them near the reception area. I'm happy to discuss community dynamics and member experience from someone who's been here since Creative Hub opened. For the next hour, Robert conducted a methodical assessment that included conversations with multiple members, observation of workspace utilization, and a detailed discussion of recent policy changes. Jennifer maintained professional composure throughout the process, but her increasing tension was visible as member after member expressed concerns about assigned seating, restricted amenities, and the loss of collaborative culture that had originally attracted them to Creative Hub. Mike Chen described productivity challenges when assigned to workspace locations that didn't support his design workflow. Sarah Thompson explained how the new policies had disrupted collaborative partnerships that had led to successful client projects. Even newer members expressed confusion about the formal procedures and administrative oversight that seemed disproportionate to their simple need for flexible workspace and professional community. When Robert asked directly about member retention, Jennifer was forced to acknowledge that 3 long-term members had canceled their memberships in the past week, though she attributed the departures to normal business transitions, rather than policy-related dissatisfaction. Let's step into the conference room for a more detailed discussion, Robert suggested after completing his member conversations. The 3 of us settled around the table where Jennifer and I had our confrontational meeting just 24 hours earlier. Robert opened his notebook and reviewed his assessment notes before addressing the complex dynamics he had observed. Based on my conversations with members and observation of current operations, it seems there are significant tensions between administrative efficiency and community culture. Jennifer, can you help me understand your approach to balancing these priorities? Jennifer consulted her prepared materials before responding with the professional confidence of someone presenting a carefully developed strategy. My focus has been on establishing clearer operational standards and professional protocols that enhance member experience through improved organization and consistency. The previous management approach was informal to the point of creating confusion about policies and procedures. And Lisa, as both a long-term member and majority shareholder, how do you assess the impact of these operational changes on community effectiveness? The question acknowledged my dual perspective while inviting honest evaluation of Jennifer's management approach. The intention to improve organization is valuable, but the specific implementation has eliminated many of the collaborative elements that made Creative Hub attractive to creative professionals. The assigned seating system, for example, has disrupted established work patterns and partnerships that took years to develop. Jennifer leaned forward slightly, clearly prepared to defend her decisions. Structure and consistency are essential for professional environments. The previous informal approach may have felt collaborative, but it created inefficiencies and unclear expectations that ultimately serve no one's interests effectively. Robert listened thoughtfully to both perspectives before asking the question that would determine Creative Hub's future direction. What would each of you recommend as the path forward for maintaining both operational effectiveness and community satisfaction? Jennifer spoke first, outlining a vision of Creative Hub as a professionally managed facility with clear policies, efficient procedures, and consistent member experiences delivered through administrative oversight. Her approach would create operational predictability, but would eliminate the organic community dynamics that had made the space successful. When my turn came, I described a collaborative management model that balanced professional standards with community input, allowing member needs and preferences to influence operational decisions while maintaining the accountability and efficiency that supported long-term sustainability. This approach required more complex decision-making processes, but would preserve the collaborative culture that attracted creative professionals to choose Creative Hub over traditional office alternatives. Robert closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair, considering the fundamentally different philosophies we had presented. These are very different visions for Creative Hub's future. Jennifer, your approach offers administrative clarity and operational efficiency. Lisa, your model prioritizes community engagement and collaborative culture. Both have merit, but they require very different management styles and organizational structures. The moment of truth had arrived. Robert's decision would determine whether Creative Hub would continue as a genuine community for creative professionals or evolve into a more traditional workspace facility focused on administrative efficiency rather than collaborative culture. Given the member feedback I've heard today and the retention concerns that have emerged, I think Creative Hub's success depends on maintaining the community culture that has been its primary differentiator in Austin's competitive coworking market, Robert said finally. Jennifer, I appreciate your focus on operational improvement, but the implementation approach has had unintended consequences that conflict with our core business model. Jennifer's expression remained professionally composed, but I could see her processing the implications of Robert's assessment. Her management approach was being evaluated as incompatible with Creative Hub's mission, rather than simply needing minor adjustments. What does that mean for my position here? She asked directly, demonstrating the courage to address the obvious question, rather than avoiding the uncomfortable conversation. Robert's response was diplomatic, but clear. I think your skills and experience would be better suited to one of our more traditional office facilities, where administrative efficiency and formal procedures are the primary priorities. Creative Hub requires a management approach that embraces community building and collaborative decision-making as core competencies. The conversation concluded with Jennifer accepting a transfer to Austin Workspace Solutions' Downtown Executive Center, where her preference for formal policies and administrative control would better align with member expectations and business model requirements. Her departure would create an opportunity to restore Creative Hub's collaborative culture while incorporating valuable lessons about operational organization and professional standards. As Robert prepared to leave, he turned to me with a question that had clearly been developing throughout his assessment. Lisa, would you consider taking a more active role in Creative Hub's management? Your understanding of both member needs and business operations could help us maintain community culture while ensuring long-term sustainability. The invitation represented exactly the opportunity I had been preparing for through 3 years of anonymous observation and community involvement. I'd be very interested in exploring that possibility. The goal would be creating a management model that serves both member satisfaction and business effectiveness through collaborative leadership. Over the following weeks, Creative Hub underwent a careful transformation that restored collaborative culture while maintaining professional standards. The assigned seating policy was replaced with a flexible system that honored member preferences while accommodating newcomers. Amenity restrictions were lifted in favor of usage guidelines developed through community input. The formal reception desk was relocated to create a more welcoming entrance that encouraged spontaneous interaction and collaboration. Most importantly, management decisions began incorporating member feedback through regular community meetings, suggestion systems, and collaborative problem-solving processes that balanced operational efficiency with community needs. The result was a workspace that felt both professional and genuinely supportive of creative collaboration. Member retention improved immediately, with several people who had been considering alternative workspace options choosing to renew their memberships. New member referrals increased as word spread about Creative Hub's renewed commitment to community culture and collaborative environment. The business metrics that mattered most showed steady improvement as the space rediscovered its identity as a genuine community rather than just a managed facility. 3 months later, Creative Hub had not only recovered its previous member satisfaction levels, but had established new standards for collaborative workspace management that attracted attention from other coworking facilities throughout Texas. The experience had demonstrated that successful community management required genuine understanding of member needs, rather than simply administrative control over their behavior. As I worked from my familiar corner desk on a busy Thursday morning, watching members engage in the spontaneous collaboration and mutual support that made Creative Hub special, I reflected on how much had changed since Jennifer's arrival had threatened to eliminate everything that made the community valuable. The journey from anonymous member to acknowledged owner had been challenging and sometimes uncomfortable, but it had ultimately served the larger purpose of preserving and enhancing a professional community that provided real value to dozens of creative professionals in Austin. The decision to reveal my ownership stake had transformed not just my relationship with Creative Hub, but my understanding of how authentic leadership could emerge from genuine community engagement, rather than hierarchical authority. The most effective management approach had turned out to be the one that trusted in people's capacity for collaboration and mutual respect, rather than requiring administrative control over their every interaction. David had been quietly supportive throughout the transition, offering perspective from his own experience with team dynamics and organizational change, while respecting my need to navigate the complex relationships within Creative Hub independently. His mother, Carol, had been surprised to learn about my ownership stake, but had expressed genuine admiration for my commitment to understanding the business from a member perspective before taking on management responsibilities. The brownstone I had prepared to move into as an escape from Creative Hub tensions had instead become a peaceful retreat where I could process the day's community interactions and plan collaborative initiatives that would continue strengthening the workspace culture. The balance between my professional responsibilities as an owner and my personal connections as a community member had found a sustainable equilibrium that served both business effectiveness and authentic relationship building. As afternoon sunlight streamed through Creative Hub's windows, illuminating members engaged in focused individual work and spontaneous collaborative conversations, I felt deep satisfaction with the community we had preserved and enhanced through collective commitment to shared values. The challenge of maintaining both professional standards and collaborative culture remained ongoing, but it was a challenge that brought out the best in everyone involved, rather than creating conflict between competing priorities. Creative Hub had become what I had always hoped it could be: a genuine community that supported creative professionals not just through workspace amenities, but through the relationships, collaborations, and mutual encouragement that made individual work feel connected to something larger and more meaningful than personal success alone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.